For decades, the inner sanctum of the British monarchy has operated under a sacred, unwritten law, absolute, unyielding discretion. Staff members sign ironclad non-disclosure agreements. Close friends vanish into aristocratic silence, and family members learn early on that the preservation of the institution always supersedes personal truth. It is a system built on locked doors, heavy velvet drapes, and the quiet understanding that what happens inside royal residences stays inside royal residences. Yet, history has repeatedly shown that the thickest walls eventually develop cracks, and the most fiercely guarded secrets rarely stay buried forever. Today, Buckingham Palace finds itself engulfed in a state of quiet panic and profound institutional shock, scrambling to contain a development that threatens to unravel over 20 years of carefully orchestrated public relations. The foundation of this crisis does not stem from a disgruntled former employee looking for a payday, nor from an investigative journalist digging through dusty archives. Instead, the tremor has originated from the most unexpected and damaging place imaginable, for within the very bloodline and inner circle of Queen Camilla herself. At the center of this unfolding storm is Annabelle Elliot, a name that has quietly rested in the background of royal history for generations, but one that now commands global attention. To understand the gravity of her recent actions, one must look beyond the glossy portraits and understand who Annabelle truly is within the complex ecosystem of the royal family. She is not a random courtier, a fleeting acquaintance, or a bitter socialite selling fabricated gossip to tabloid editors. She is Camilla's younger sister, the steadfast confidant who stood shoulder to shoulder with her through every seismic shift of her controversial life. Annabelle was there for the private family dynamics of the Shan household, the fox hunts, the high society debutante balls, the torrential waves of public hatred, the quiet grief, the intense rebranding campaigns, the high-stakes wedding negotiations, and finally, the historic crowning moment on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. For decades, Annabelle was the ultimate vault, a person who knew where every metaphorical body was buried, possessing an intimate, unfiltered view of Camilla's ascent from one of the most reviled figures in modern British history to the exalted position of Queen Consort. According to explosive reports that have rapidly leaked from elite social circles, that unbreakable vault has finally cracked open. The catalyst reportedly occurred during a private, low-key dinner gathering in the peaceful and affluent countryside of the Cotswolds, far away from the glaring lenses of the paparazzi and the watchful eyes of palace aides. Surrounded by longtime acquaintances, enjoying a few glasses of fine wine and lulled into a false sense of absolute security, Annabelle allegedly let down her guard. Witnesses and insiders suggest that her words did not burst forth in a dramatic, table-flipping display of hysterical anger. Instead, her delivery was far more chilling, marked by a profound, heavy exhaustion, carrying the undeniable weight of someone who had silently carried a crushing burden for over 30 years. It was a poignant, resigned voice of an aging woman who simply ran out of energy to keep maintaining a meticulously constructed facade. Among the leaked statements that have sent shockwaves through royal circles, one particular line has caused absolute chaos behind palace doors. Annabelle reportedly turned to those at the table and offered an assessment of her sister that completely shatters the official narrative. She's not the woman the world thinks she is. She's changed. Or maybe this is who she was all along. On a superficial level, a casual observer might dismiss such a remark as mundane family friction. After all, even the closest of siblings experience disagreements, estrangements, and falling outs. But Annabelle Elliot is no ordinary family member offering a generic complaint. She is a solitary person who has observed Camilla's entire psychological and social trajectory from the very beginning to the present day. Her intimate proximity lends her words an undeniable gravity, transforming what would normally be dismissed as harmless family gossip into a devastating piece of personal testimony. The cascading details emerging from that Cotswolds dinner have grown increasingly unsettling with every new leak. Reports indicate that Annabelle was not merely complaining about her sister being demanding, particular, or difficult to manage in private settings, traits that are often excused as par for the course among high-ranking royals. Rather, she was describing a personality deeply addicted to absolute control, someone utterly obsessed with image, status, and power to such a degree that even those closest to her were treated as disposable instruments when they no longer serve a purpose. The reported commentary carried a stark warning. You have to understand, she never lets things go. Not a slight, not an insult, not old gossip. Everything is calculated, even her kindness. This is not the standard venting of a sibling annoyed by a petty holiday argument. This is a deeply revealing portrait of a fundamental psychological orientation toward dominance and manipulation. The fact that these observations were articulated not with fiery rage, but with a deep, hollow resignation, makes them land with even greater impact. It sounds precisely like a person who spent decades propping up an illusion, only to realize the heavy toll it took on her own conscience. As the ripples of these revelations continue to spread outward, shaking the very pillars of the monarchy, the implications reach far beyond simple family drama, striking directly at the core of how the public perceives the royal institution. For 20 years, the public relations machinery of the crown labored tirelessly to recast Camilla from a divisive figure into a patient, dignified, and charitable royal matriarch who simply weathered the storm through quiet endurance. Yet, the testimony of a lifelong sister suggests an entirely different reality, one driven by calculated patience, unyielding ambition, and a cold, strategic game. With Bab 1 establishing this monumental shift in perception, the scaffolding of the palace's narrative has begun to tremble, leaving royal watchers worldwide questioning what further secrets might emerge from the vault that Annabelle Elliot has finally unlocked. To truly grasp the devastating weight of Annabelle Elliot's alleged disclosures, one must venture back into the darkest, most scrutinized chapter of modern royal history, the tragic life and untimely death of Princess Diana. While official palace narratives spent decades carefully smoothing over the sharp edges of the 1990s, the reported comments from that Cotswolds dinner drag those long-buried ghosts back into the harsh light of day. According to sources close to the table, Annabelle did not merely touch upon peripheral noise of the era. She confronted the harrowing human cost of the institution's silence. She reportedly reflected on what it was like to watch Diana slowly break down under intense media scrutiny and relentless public pressure, while the individuals closest to the epicenter remained deliberately, comfortably quiet. We saw how broken Diana was, how isolated, and we remained quiet. Annabelle allegedly confessed to the stunned dinner guests, a direct admission complicity that transforms palace gossip into a profound moral reckoning. The gravity of that statement cuts straight to the bone because it acknowledges a grim reality that many royal loyalists have spent a lifetime trying to deny. Annabelle reportedly went even further, asserting that during those turbulent years of intense public outrage, Camilla displayed zero remorse or self-reflection. Instead of showing empathy for a deeply troubled young mother trapped in a loveless marriage, Camilla's primary concern was reportedly annoyance at how harshly public opinion had turned against her own reputation. While the entire world went into mourning over Diana's tragic passing, Camilla's focus remained rigidly fixed on repairing her own public image, calculating her next steps, and plotting her eventual return to prominence. There was no hesitation, no public apology, and no step backward from the spotlight. As one chilling summary of the leaked conversation put it, Diana was a storm to be waited out, and when the global outcry finally calmed down, Camilla simply slipped right back into place, stepping even closer to the ultimate crown than anyone had ever dared to imagine. If these leaked accounts hold true, they fundamentally dismantled the cornerstone of the 20-year rebranding campaign that brought Camilla from the absolute depths of public hatred to the throne. For 2 decades, the world was fed a comforting narrative of patience, quiet endurance, and earned rehabilitation. The story of a woman who simply waited for the truth to catch up with her good character. But Annabelle's alleged testimony reframes that entire narrative into something far more calculating. A cold, strategic waiting game where human lives and emotional devastation were nothing more than temporary obstacles to be outlasted. That is not the story of misunderstood romantic heroine. That is a profile of a master tactician who treated a national tragedy as a tactical delay. The sudden emergence of these revelations has forced historians and royal commentators alike to re-examine every milestone of Camilla's ascent, asking uncomfortable questions about what really happened behind closed doors while the world was distracted by grief. Yet, the questions surrounding why Annabelle chose to speak out now, after 30 years of absolute loyalty and ironclad discretion, point to a much deeper, more complex shift in family dynamics. Observers close to the situation suggest that the catalyst wasn't just a sudden burst of retrospective guilt over Diana, but rather a profound disillusionment with how power changed Camilla as her role expanded. Insiders note that as the crown finally rested on her head, the authority did not soften her. Instead, it seemingly hardened her, making her less forgiving, increasingly demanding, and fiercely protective of her own bloodline at the expense of everyone else. Annabelle, described by those who know her as introspective and deeply observant, reportedly watched this transformation unfold with growing unease. The woman she had detected through scandal and suffering was allegedly morphing into a monarchical architect, obsessed with rewriting the royal family tree to prioritize her own children and grandchildren. This ambition to elevate her own extended family has reportedly become a major point of silent friction behind palace walls, creating deep invisible fault lines between Clarence's house and the younger generation of royals. For Annabelle, watching her sister systematically position her own blood relatives in ways that subtly sideline Prince William, Princess Kate, and their young children proved to be a bridge too far. It is one thing to stand by a sibling fighting for personal happiness against the rigid rules of an unforgiving institution. It is entirely another thing to watch that sibling leverage the monarchy to build an independent dynasty that overshadows the direct future of the crown. Sources suggest that Annabelle grew increasingly uncomfortable with what she perceived as an insatiable desire for total control, a realization that slowly eroded the foundational loyalty of a lifetime. The silent tension that has occasionally flashed across television screens during royal balcony appearances and formal family gatherings suddenly makes chilling sense when viewed through the lens of a sister who realized the monster she helped shelter had finally taken over the kingdom. Compounding this internal family fracture is the profound influence of Catherine, the Princess of Wales. According to several leaked insights, Annabelle developed a deep, genuine fondness and admiration for Kate, often drawing mental parallels between Kate's graceful endurance under pressure and the tragic isolation once experienced by Diana. Watching Kate navigate the exact same machinery of the firm that once chewed Diana up and spat her out apparently stirred something profound within Annabelle. It forced her to confront her own historical inaction, the realization that she had stood guard for her sister while another innocent woman was being systematically destroyed by the very same institutional gears. One insider claimed that Annabelle emotionally remarked during a previous gathering that Diana never stood a chance because she was too authentically human, while those around her were too cowardly to offer real defense. That is not the casual grumbling of an ungrateful relative. That is a heavy, suffocating weight of conscience finally breaking under the immense pressure of unconfessed truths. As these layers of personal betrayal, historical guilt, and ambition continue to unravel, the psychological toll on the palace core has become palpable. The silence emanating from Buckingham Palace is no longer interpreted as calm dignity. Rather, it looks increasingly like the terrified holding her breath before a massive structural collapse. If Annabelle's wine-fueled dinner confessions are merely the opening salvo, the genuine fear within elite royal circles is what else she might be keeping locked away in private journals or personal correspondence. The vault has sprung its first major leak, and as Bab 2 draws to a close, the entire institution is left staring down a terrifying reality. The greatest threat to a queen's hard-earned crown does not come from her enemies on the outside, but from the sister who stood right beside her in the shadows, holding the keys all along. As the smoke from the Cotswolds dinner table continues to billow across the landscape of the British establishment, the ultimate question facing Buckingham Palace is no longer whether the damage can be contained, but rather how deeply the institutional foundations have been compromised. For generations, the monarchy has survived wars, economic depressions, family scandals, and generational shifts by relying on an absolute, unbendable rule of collective silence. Staff members sign their legal bindings. Courtiers manage their talking points, and family members learn that personal grievances are always sacrificed at the altar of crown preservation. Yet, this entire carefully constructed ecosystem depends entirely upon a singular premise, that the people standing closest to the throne share an unbroken, mutual interest in maintaining the illusion. When that sacred circle breaks from within, when the person holding the master keys decides that the weight of the truth is finally heavier than the loyalty to the crown, the standard crisis management playbooks become entirely useless. You cannot fire your own sister. You cannot exile a lifelong confidant to a remote overseas estate without creating an even bigger, more uncontrollable media spectacle. And you cannot sue her for defamation without dragging every single skeleton out of the royal closet and placing it directly into the public courtroom. Camilla finds herself trapped in a corner of her own making, realizing with dawning horror that the very person she trusted implicitly to keep her secrets has become the instrument of her undoing. The immediate fallout behind closed doors at Clarence's house in Buckingham Palace has reportedly reached a pitch of frantic, unbridled chaos. Insiders whisper that communication between the two sisters has ceased entirely, replaced by an icy, deafening vacuum where dialogue once stood. Queen Camilla is reportedly not just furious at the betrayal, but genuinely frightened by the unpredictable horizon. When a sister who knows the most intimate details of your entire life starts speaking out in public, the natural terror is simple. What else does she know, and what else might she eventually decide to share? The rumors swirling through high society circles regarding private journals, personal letters, and decades-old correspondence have taken on an electric, urgent quality. If those physical archives exist, and if Annabelle ever decides that a few wine-fueled dinner quotes were merely the opening chapters of a much larger confession, the resulting catastrophe will be absolute and irreversible. It would transition the narrative from whispered table gossip to undeniable, documented testimony, rewriting modern royal history in a way that no amount of public relations spin could ever hope to repair. This profound vulnerability highlights the stunning asymmetry of Camilla's historic rise and fall. It took decades of masterclass patience, calculated silence, strategic alliances, and unyielding emotional endurance to transform herself from the most reviled woman in the United Kingdom into a crowned queen consort. That monumental journey required an almost superhuman level of image management, letting public outrage burn itself out while silently securing power within the palace walls. Yet, as history so frequently demonstrates, an empire built on hidden truths and manic perceptions can be brought down not by an army of external enemies, but by a single, unmitigated crack in its inner foundation. It took decades to painstakingly construct the public image of a patient, misunderstood royal matriarch, but it took only a single evening, a handful of glasses of wine, and a sister's sudden exhaustion to crack that facade wide open for the entire world to see. The contrast is as poetic as it is brutal. A lifetime of careful maneuvering undone by a single moment of absolute human honesty. Meanwhile, as the storm swirls violently around Camilla, the broader royal family dynamic is experiencing a fascinating and telling polarization. Prince William and Princess Kate have emerged from the chaos looking stronger, more stable, and more deeply trusted by the British public than ever before. This surge in public confidence has not arisen because they launched a counter-campaign or issued defensive statements. Rather, it is a stark contrast doing all the heavy lifting. While Camilla's legacy is increasingly defined by tactical ambition, image control, and silent complicity in past tragedies, William and Kate's approach continues to be anchored in traditional duty, emotional transparency, and unwavering consistency. Insiders suggest that Kate was deeply and privately moved by Annabelle's revelations regarding Diana, not out of a sense of malicious vindication, but because it validated the core principles of compassion, vulnerability, and human warmth that Diana originally fought for. William, fiercely protective of his wife and her children, is reportedly using this moment to double down on his vision for a modernized, streamlined monarchy, one that honors his mother's enduring legacy rather than bending to the ambitions of his stepmother. The public reception of young royals like Princess Charlotte, whose recent public appearances have been met with overwhelming warmth and affection, further cements a sense of generational continuity and hope precisely when the rest of the institution appears dangerously fractured. The broader implications of this scandal extend far beyond individual personalities, touching directly upon the changing nature of institutional loyalty in the 21st century. We live in an era where modern audiences have grown allergic to manufactured perfection and institutional cover-ups. The traditional mechanisms of royal PR, designed for an analog world where a well-placed statement or charitable appearance could sweep a scandal under the rug, are proving increasingly obsolete in the face of digital age leaks and unfiltered human testimony. When the public realizes that the fairy tale redemption arcs presented to them are often built over quiet graves of accountability, the backlash is swift and unforgiving. Polling data has consistently shown Camilla's popularity lagging significantly behind other senior royals, and these latest revelations are guaranteed to accelerate that decline. The court of public opinion is notoriously fickle, but it possesses a long, unforgiving memory when it comes to perceived hypocrisy. The narrative of the patient, devoted wife now finds itself locked in a permanent, unwinnable war against the narrative of the calculating strategist who waited out a national tragedy to secure her crown. As we look toward the uncertain future of the British monarchy, it becomes abundantly clear that the story is far from finished. Annabelle Elliot could theoretically retreat further into private life, perhaps issuing a carefully worded denial or claiming she was catastrophically misinterpreted by her dining companions. Yet, the deafening silence from her camp speaks volumes, carrying a weight far heavier than any forced denial ever could. King Charles, aging, exhausted, and caught in an impossible crossfire, is left desperately trying to balance the legacy of the woman he fought a decades-long war to legitimize with the sacred duty of protecting the crown's future for his son and grandchildren. The machinery of state will continue to turn, garden parties will proceed, and red carpets will continue to roll out. But the internal climate of the palace has fundamentally shifted forever. The vault has been unlocked. The quiet complicity of decades has been shattered, and the ghosts of the past have officially returned to claim their space at the table. The British monarchy is holding its collective breath, waiting with quiet dread to see what truth spills out next from a sister who finally decided that the crushing weight of silence was simply too heavy a price to pay.